Cracks, 2009, is an intense and captivating story about power, desire, and betrayal set in an all-girls boarding school. It follows how a charming teacher's hidden secrets start to unravel the lives of her students. From the get-go, we meet the mysterious Miss G, the charming teacher who pretty much runs her all-girls boarding school with a blend of magnetism and a no-nonsense attitude. Then there's Di Radfield, her favourite student who's fiercely loyal and struggles inside, setting the stage for all the drama that follows. And don't forget Fiamma Corona, the daring new girl from Spain. She's got her own vibe going on, and her unexpected layers really stir things up fast, especially since she's calling out Miss G's authority directly. What's the hidden secret with Miss G? And could it be why everything's going off the rails? Stick around. We'll figure it out by the end. So our story starts at a strict all-girls boarding school in 1934 England, where Miss G reigned supreme. She wasn't just a teacher, she was the whole vibe of the school, this mysterious woman wrapped in elegance who basically ran the show. Every student was totally obsessed with her, but one girl was clearly the favourite. Di, who Miss G had basically crowned as the unofficial queen of the diving team. Di had always felt special under Miss G's watchful eye. She knew all the insider stuff about the team, and honestly, she lived for those moments when Miss G would throw a compliment her way. But then, news dropped that some new student was coming. This new girl, Fiamma, was showing up from all over Spain. Word around campus was that she was like actual royalty or something, with this whole exotic vibe going on. While the other girls were buzzing with excitement, Di was low-key freaking out inside. I mean, she'd always been Miss G's golden girl, right? When Fiamma finally strutted through those school doors, Di went straight into power mode. She sat Fiamma down and basically read her the riot act about all the school rules. Di was definitely one of those my way or the highway types, and she was clearly hoping to mould Fiamma into another perfect little student. But Fiamma? She wasn't having any of it. Despite Miss G's whole control freak routine, Fiamma kept this cool, independent attitude that was kinda refreshing. While the other girls were basically drinking Miss G's Kool-Aid, Fiamma was like, "Nah, I'm good," and just did her own thing. Then came this epic moment during diving practice. Fiamma dove into the water with such ridiculous grace that everyone just stood there with their jaws on the floor. It was like watching a pro show up at a high school game. She didn't just dive, she made a statement. Between these show-stopping moments, Fiamma had this whole secret life thing going on. She'd write these letters to someone back home, pouring out all her thoughts about the weird English boarding school traditions and her dreams for the future. That little private ritual just made everyone even more curious about her. One night, and this is the part that everyone remembers, Miss G went totally off script. She snuck around waking up all the girls when they should have been sleeping. Without explaining a dang thing, she led them all to this lake behind the school. Under this gorgeous full moon, she organised this impromptu midnight swim party. The girls were half like, what the heck, and half living for this unexpected adventure. For that one magical night by the lake, all those suffocating rules just disappeared. Even in this super strict place, they found this tiny pocket of freedom that felt absolutely electric. For Fiamma, Di, and all the girls caught in this weird emotional web, that night became this perfect memory of what it means to really feel alive, even when you're surrounded by rules and complicated feelings and all that messy stuff. After the big night of surprises, things at the school started to change in a way that everyone could feel. It turned out that Miss G had ended her fling with Mr. Dutoit, one of the fathers who looked like a movie star with big strong hands and bright blue eyes. Most of the girls whispered about it, saying that while Miss G never really fell in love, their affair was driven purely by wild desire. The gossip spread like wildfire around the school corridors, and some of the girls couldn't help but joke about how older men always knew a thing or two about the magic of passion. They compared Mr. Du Toit to some character from those fancy films, all adventure and mystery and stuff. Even though Miss G had kicked him to the curb, the whole situation left everyone kinda shook, like, whoa, even the mighty Miss G gets caught up in messy relationship drama. In the middle of all this juicy gossip, the boring school routines kept going. One of those routines was writing letters home, which sounds totally lame, but was actually this secret creative outlet for everyone. Fiamma, that Spanish girl who was basically perfect at everything, wrote this letter that had everyone talking. She crafted this whole fantasy about a king, his daughter, some magical blue diamond, and this tapestry that supposedly led to adventure. Her story wasn't just entertaining, it was low-key rebellious in a way that made everyone want to be part of her world. Before long, Fiamma's stories became the hottest topic at school. The girls would huddle together and gush about how her words just flowed and painted this whole other universe beyond their stuffy school walls. Her storytelling skills made her crazy popular, and Di was not handling it well. Poor Di had been the queen bee forever as Miss G's pet, and suddenly she's watching her throne get snatched by the new girl. Not long after, Miss G went into full control freak mode again. She gathered all the girls for this super intense, let me remind you of the rules session. In that stern teacher voice that could make anyone straighten up, she laid down the law about what they could and couldn't do. Miss G was convinced that being strict was somehow going to make them Olympic-level divers or whatever, but Fiamma just sat there with this little smirk that basically said, "Yeah, I hear you talking, but I'm going to do my own thing anyway." As the days went by, Fiamma's natural charm and that rebel spirit just kept winning people over. Her letter and her whole, "I'm not afraid to be myself" vibe made it clear she wasn't just some random new student, she was straight up changing the game at this uptight school. Even while Miss G was desperately clinging to her power, everyone could see that Fiamma was bringing something fresh to their little world, like opening a window in a room that had been stuffy for years. Slowly, Fiamma started to notice the cracks in Miss G's perfect image. Behind all that confidence and those rigid rules was just a person with their own baggage and fails. Once Fiamma figured this out, she doubled down on being authentic and started helping the other girls see that sometimes the real lessons come from questioning authority, not just blindly following some teacher who's got her own issues to sort out. Miss G began the day by telling a wild story of her past adventures in far-off lands, filled with crocodiles lurking in murky mangrove swamps and daring escapes from dangerous canoes. As she spun this crazy tale with that dramatic teacher energy, Fiamma just sat there, quietly connecting the dots. The whole story sounded weirdly familiar because, plot twist, she'd already read the exact same story in Spanish. Talk about awkward. Fiamma was sitting there like, did this lady seriously just steal a story and pretend it happened to her? Miss G had always put Fiamma on this weird pedestal, thinking she was somehow different from the other girls. She was totally obsessed with getting Fiamma to trust her. In this super cringe attempt to bond, Miss G kept pushing Fiamma to jump into the water and test her limits, going on and on about how taking risks was essential to becoming a real diver. But Fiamma wasn't buying what Miss G was selling. She could smell the manipulation from a mile away. This wasn't about friendship, this was about Miss G's control issues. Later that day, Miss G tried another tactic. She came back from the market with some fancy food she'd made especially for Fiamma. Miss G probably thought she was being all subtle with this special treatment thing. But Fiamma, being the absolute queen she was, refused to keep the treat for herself. Instead, she shared it with all the other girls, basically sending Miss G a clear message. I see your manipulation, and I'm not playing along. In this kind of tense moment, the other girls in the lead of Di, They gathered some supplies and forced Fiamma to get away from the school. Fiamma took their advice and bounced from the school grounds, hoping for a taste of freedom. But reality hit hard when there was no ferry waiting to take her home, and before she knew it, she was dragged back to school. Talk about a reality check that escaping this whole situation wasn't going to be as easy as walking out the door. During this one diving lesson, Fiamma finally snapped. After busting their butts, practicing for literally years, she asked the million-dollar question: why don't we ever compete against other schools? Miss G looked like she'd seen a ghost, totally caught in her own lie. Turns out, those competitions they'd been promised were just made-up stories to keep them all in line and under Miss G's thumb. That was the moment Fiamma saw through all the BS. Miss G's whole "I'm helping you become better divers" routine was really just about controlling every single thing these girls did. All the pressure to jump into freezing water, to push themselves beyond healthy limits, to follow every ridiculous rule. It was making Fiamma feel like she couldn't breathe. She started realizing that Miss G's version of friendship came with way too many strings attached, and that you can't really be free when someone's watching your every move. Even though Miss G tried her hardest with all those special treats and stolen adventure stories, Fiamma's independent spirit was just too strong to be broken. Those diving lessons that were supposed to bring everyone together had turned into this weird power struggle where Fiamma's genuine desire for real adventure kept clashing with Miss G's need to control everything. While the other girls might keep following along like they always had, Fiamma was clearly over it. She was determined to break free from Miss G's carefully constructed little kingdom. Di and Fiamma's unexpected bond began in a quiet moment when Di, feeling a twinge of sympathy for Fiamma's loneliness, accepted a small bottle of perfume that Fiamma had given her. It wasn't just any old gift. It was Fiamma's way of reaching out, like she was saying, "Hey, I see you," without actually saying the words. That little gesture hit different for Di, sparking this weird mix of feelings she wasn't prepared for. Later that evening, the girls were all hanging out in one of the dorm rooms, bored out of their minds and itching for something, anything, to happen. Fiamma was just chilling there, but somehow her calm presence made her stand out from everyone else. The girls, sick of the same old routine and Miss G's endless rules, turned to Fiamma like, "Got any ideas to make this night less boring?" With this little smile that spelled trouble, Fiamma suggested they throw this secret midnight feast where everyone could dress up as different characters and just let loose for once. The girls went nuts for the idea, and suddenly they were all plotting this mini rebellion like their lives depended on it. When midnight finally rolled around, the whole vibe shifted. These normally proper boarding school girls were now running around in crazy costumes with flowers in their hair, turning their boring dorm into this colourful party zone. They were dancing and joking and stuffing their faces with all the forbidden snacks they'd managed to sneak in. But as the night went on, they all started acting different. The excitement and whatever they were drinking hit hard. Their laugh got all sloppy, and Fiamma was a bit too drunk. She couldn't even walk straight, which got some of the other girls worried. Miss G showed up, of course. That woman had like a sixth sense for fun. When she spotted Fiamma all drunk, she took her aside with this fake concerned look, saying she needed to hide her away until she sobered up. But what happened next was messed up. Di, being all quiet and freaked out, watched through a crack in the door as Miss G led Fiamma away. What went down in that dark room of Miss G was something Di couldn't quite process, intimate and wrong in ways that would stick with her forever. The next morning was rough. Most of the girls were dealing with killer hangovers and this weird feeling that something bad had happened. Then they all saw it, Fiamma marching next to Miss G, looking like she was ready to burn the whole school down. Fiamma's eyes were straight up blazing as she warned Miss G that she knew exactly what went down last night, and she wasn't planning to keep quiet about it. Her voice was scary calm, like the quiet before a storm. Di, still messed up from what she'd witnessed, kept her distance at first, but eventually she worked up the courage to talk to Miss G and tried to play it cool, explaining how Fiamma's threats could ruin her reputation and mess up everything at school. Miss G's careful manipulation actually worked a little. Di seemed to appreciate the heads up, but it also made the whole team situation even more toxic. Not long after that conversation, Dee got all the other girls together and they went looking for Fiamma. They finally found her by the lake, alone and radiating anger and hurt. What happened next was brutal. Fueled by jealousy, confusion, and some twisted idea of loyalty to Miss G, the girls attacked Fiamma. They were all over her, hitting and pushing, until suddenly Fiamma couldn't breathe right. It was an asthma attack. And just like that, their anger turned to panic. The girls freaked out trying to help, and Di, desperate to fix the situation, ran to get Miss G. But here's the most messed up part. Instead of helping, Miss G ordered Di to leave. She straight up abandoned Fiamma when she needed help the most. Di watched in horror as Miss G, their teacher who was supposed to protect them, just stood there watching as Fiamma struggled to breathe, until finally, she didn't. It was in that awful silence by the lake that Di finally got it. What Miss G had done wasn't just controlling or manipulative. It was something much darker, a betrayal that would haunt every single one of them for the rest of their lives. After Fiamma's death, a heavy silence settled over the school. The girls, who had been caught up in their reckless games and misguided protests, now wore the weight of guilt like an invisible shroud. Everyone felt it, an aching, shared remorse that made even the usual chatter fall quiet. They'd been playing a dangerous game, and the outcome was too terrible to ignore. Di, who had witnessed the whole nightmare, finally gathered the courage to pull everyone together. In this hushed, shaky voice, she started spilling the truth about what really went down that night. She told them how Miss G had totally taken advantage of Fiamma when she was drunk and vulnerable. Di described what she saw through that crack in the door, this messed up, intimate moment that would basically haunt her forever. Without sugarcoating anything, Di laid out the whole ugly truth about Miss G's manipulation and betrayal, which was a far cry from all those fake adventure stories she used to feed them. "You all need to know," Di said softly, "that Fiamma wasn't just the fun, daring new girl. She was real, and what happened to her was not a mistake made in a silly game. It was something far worse. Miss G isn't the hero we thought she was. She's been using her authority to keep us in line, and in doing so, she's hurt someone we loved." The room went dead silent as reality hit the girls like a ton of bricks. Their eyes, once full of that rebellious spark, now just looked hollow with regret and shock. It was like watching that carefree spirit they all shared just drain away, replaced by this crushing realization of what they'd been part of. Not long after, the girls marched together to confront Miss G. They were terrified but determined, demanding answers about why she just stood there and let Fiamma die. Their questions came out all angry and broken. For the first time ever, these girls weren't just Miss G's little puppets. They were standing up to the woman who'd basically controlled their entire world. Miss G's face turned to stone as she listened to them. She tried to brush the whole thing off as just some tragic accident that nobody could have stopped. But the girls weren't buying her BS anymore. They yelled and pleaded and cried for some kind of justice. Through all the chaos, Di's voice cut through the clearest. She didn't hold back, telling Miss G straight up that Fiamma's death wasn't just bad luck. It was directly because of what Miss G did, a betrayal that wrecked them all. After what felt like forever of this emotional showdown, everything just kind of fizzled out into this sad, empty silence. everyone knew nothing could bring Fiamma back or erase the pain they were drowning in. The school tried to move on in the days that followed, but you could feel Fiamma's ghost in every hallway and every corner of that place. For Di, carrying around all this guilt and knowledge became way too heavy. Holding on to that little bottle of perfume Fiamma gave her, which now felt like this sacred symbol of their brief connection, Di made the biggest decision of her life. She left a goodbye letter for the team, this heartfelt note promising she was leaving to explore the world beyond those suffocating school walls. In her letter, Di wrote about finding beauty in the unknown, the importance of living freely, and carrying forward Fiamma's spirit of fearlessness and truth. So, what was Miss G really up to? The truth is, she wasn't just a caring guardian. She was more of a control freak who used her power to mess with every part of the girls' lives. This sneaky abuse of power, disguised as fun stories and wild adventures, got out of hand and ended up wrecking lives. Thanks for hanging out with us at Sapphic Nook, where we're diving into Cracks 2009 to uncover the real untold story behind all the drama. Stay bold and don't forget, sometimes the most interesting truths are lurking in the shadows. If you like this content, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and share your wild thoughts down below.